Welcome everyone to Survivor Rites Live, our show tonight. We are on with Dr. Natalie Bolin and private investigator Cynthia Liles. A huge show for us tonight. Very much looking forward to it. We will be posting Natalie's credentials again tonight in the show notes so that everyone is very, very clear on the authority with which she speaks. Cynthia has been involved, born and raised, has been, most of you know, part of the investigation and deals with this on a regular basis. Our issue and topic tonight is the suicide crisis inside the 2x2 church. We are going to discuss everything from suicide ideation to what has happened, and our focus really is about awareness, prevention, accountability, and care, and a way forward. At the end of the day today, we want to have a way forward. There's a lot of patterns that we're going to be discussing. There's a lot of pressure to be quiet. There's a lot of funerals that don't even mention what happened. The questions that nobody was allowed to ask because lives are at stake. So we understand the seriousness of this issue. We have prepared for this with our whole hearts and minds and with incredible reverence. So we all, three of us and everyone, many of us, want to honor every individual life that has been lost. We also will not be exploiting those stories. We refuse to do that. That's not why we're here. We do want to say that if this topic is going to be too heavy for you tonight, that you would step away and seek support. We want to remind you that the suicide hotline is 988. That is 988. We may be reminding you several times tonight. We also want to make ourselves available to anyone that is in crisis. So if, as of this conversation, you are needing someone to talk to, we are very, very clear about the fact that silence does not protect faith. It protects systems. And that is the dialogue that we want to have with you tonight. So for decades, the reputation of the church has mattered more than the transparency. And that has driven the despair of so many people underground. And when despair goes underground, we are very clear that people die. And it is a very, very sad reality. Tonight, this is not an attack on the belief. It is not an attack on the church. It is a stand for human life. I'm going to start with you, Natalie. I'm not sure where Cynthia went. I'm sure she'll be back here in a second. But why does this conversation matter so much?
Well, we are in a mental health crisis within the 2x2 church. People are not okay, both outside of the church and even people still attending. And we kept saying that even as the crisis started to unfold, like, people are not okay. Let's take a time out. Let's talk about people are not okay. There has been suicides within the 2x2 church. What we're seeing under Pathways to Healing is the acuity of survivors is extremely high. And so we're working with survivors to obtain the right level of care in their treatment. And sometimes that needs to be a psychiatric hospitalization. Sometimes that needs to be a crisis stabilization center. Sometimes that looks like intensive outpatient services. So the acuity is just extremely high. I think it speaks to the longevity of this investigation, and I know that Cynthia can speak to that. But then on top of all of this, we have a ministry that is preaching / promoting suffering as a righteous act. And so that's why we need to have this conversation and why it matters right now.
Yeah. Cynthia, you probably didn't hear all that, but the question is, why does this conversation matter so much right now?
Well, I think the more you can bring things out in public, into the public sphere, and talk about them, the shame is in the secret, right? And so even between the time we had this scheduled last week or the week before, we had to cancel and reschedule. You probably did too. I got so many messages from people who have had suicide ideation that said, thank you for being willing to have this conversation. You know, you are not alone if you are a survivor that has had suicide ideation. There is a strong link between child sex abuse and suicide ideation. And we'll see. I didn't look to see if there are any studies. Dr. Bolin, you might know. There might be a link between spiritual abuse and suicide ideation as well. I don't know if there have been any studies on that. But anyhow, good to have the conversation, get it out in the open.
Yes. So we're going to talk tonight to people who have left. We also want to include anyone who is still in the church tonight. It is very, very important that this dialogue reach them if there's any way for that to happen. We know that many have had this in their families. Our goal is to reduce shame and fear. Our goal is to increase emotional literacy around suicide. So we're going to talk a lot about language tonight. If we use vocabulary that doesn't make sense or you don't know, please jot it down or I'm going to be monitoring comments. If you would please just put in there, please explain what that word means or whatever. We have all had a lot of trauma training here. So our other goal is to equip people who are not in that space, but people who want to be helpful to notice the risk and respond safely. So we want to teach you also how to do that tonight and to see it when the symptoms are there. And we also want to rebuild connection. One of the biggest things that does keep people alive is connection. So we want to focus heavily on making sure that those connections are secure, and we want to rebuild for anyone that's left out there feeling like they're still alone. Let's talk for a second and just get this elephant out of the room about the scope of the problem. What matters, what patterns have you personally observed regarding suicide within the 2x2 systems? I want to make it clear that we will not be discussing any specific cases tonight. We're not going to be going through anybody's case file. What we're going to do is a big picture view of the fact that this is in fact a crisis. So let's start there. Natalie, what patterns have you personally observed regarding suicide in the 2x2 church?
So we've talked a lot in the past couple podcasts about high control religious groups, cults. Really, they tend to create a culture that creates chronic fear, helplessness, hopelessness, and all of those are ingredients to suicidality. There is no independent self or life outside of the 2x2 group, and so many times we see people feel trapped, they feel stuck, and Cynthia, you mentioned suicide abuse is linked to depression, it's linked to anxiety, it's linked to identity confusion, and then suicidal ideation. And so when you look at other ingredients to suicidality, isolation, especially from an outside support, outside of your system, and then an important religious belief, it's an all or nothing belief system where it goes as far as losing salvation. So now you have salvation tied to your reality and how you're feeling. And then that intense grief and identity collapse, like when you decide to leave a community. So you lose your community, you lose your connection. And so all of that wrapped up just makes for the ingredients for people to be at risk for suicide.
Cynthia, have you noticed any specific patterns?
Well, because of my position in investigating these cases, I know of just 7 or 8 in the last 3 years that have happened. It's just kept so quiet within families that it's not talked about. Nobody really talks about it. So I just know there's been a big problem with it. And looking back, as we're working on these cases and working on specific perpetrators, then you start seeing a pattern there too, where uh, suspected survivors have committed suicide. People who we think were abused. And this has happened on a lot of the child sex abuse cases I've worked on against institutions of trust. I was reminiscing recently with an attorney that I've worked for a long time about a Boy Scout case we had where the Scoutmaster was in his position for, I think, 25 years. Anyhow, so my job, it was from the, I think, 1940s, early 1940s. So my job in those cases is to go back and find every living member of that troop. And so we started seeing a huge pattern of people who had been lost to suicide that were from that troop. So we're kind of seeing the same thing here, where the numbers are way more than the national average within this group, right?
Right.
So
And
that's
part of
what I'm
that is
seeing.
that yeah,
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
community is just so insular. It's just what's that?
Mm-hmm. I said, go
Yeah,
ahead, say what you
that.
were saying. Yeah.
Oh, a lot of it is just that because it's such a closed society, and that also one
Hmm.
of the other patterns that I know for sure often happens is that there are clusters
Hmm.
sometimes
Yes.
of them, and I also know of several situations in the two by two church that has happened. So that what's the difference between an individual crisis, which is someone who is feeling suicidal, and systemic pressure? When those two things are, there's tension there. Talk to us for a second about what happens when those two things collide.
Well, I think systemic pressure can cause an individual crisis.
Yep.
When you think about an individual crisis, I mean, that's a person's just the overwhelming breakdown in coping and day-to-day coping, distress, unable to function, unable to do what you do every day. And then so you have that, and then you have this systemic pressure, which it can be social, it can be economic, it could be your job, it could be institutional, your school, your church. And so you collide, you have that collision, and it really shapes people's behavior, but it takes away options, right? When you have this crisis and you have this institution and they collide, and they're not supportive, and it can actually cause individual crisis.
Absolutely. Let's
Yeah,
talk for just a
oh,
second.
sorry. I was going to
You
say,
go.
Crystal, two contributing factors to suicide ideation in survivors of child sex abuse is lack of social support and parental denial. Well, here you have a whole institution that's denying, right? So those are huge contributing factors.
Yep.
Absolutely. You have not only your parents, you have extended family and the whole church and everybody you
Yep.
grew up with. It's denying. Yeah. So talk for just a second about culturally what happens when someone is successful in taking their life. I do want to address that because it so often is just swept under the rug. How does it get explained? How do we do better in that dialogue specifically when that happens?
Well, it's not talked about. It's silence, and everything's done very secretly, which then kind of aids to untruths about the situation. I think we also have to bring up the institution's belief about suicide, so the church's belief about suicide, and that belief is it results in a lost salvation. And I've heard that numerous times from workers and from the church. And so when you have that fundamental belief that suicide will result in a lost salvation, it totally is not even acknowledged. And so then you have so many untruths about the situation.
Anything you want to add to that, Cynthia?
No.
So, what I have said for many years is that shame unravels connection. It's something that I learned in therapy many years ago back when I was one of these people. I luckily survived my attempt at my life, but I do know that shame unravels connection. We also know, we already had this conversation, that connection is often what keeps us alive and saves lives. So you already mentioned this, Natalie, but we're going to talk about it again. When the messages from the platform are about weakness, obedience, faithfulness, how do those things potentially intensify the despair that someone might already be feeling?
Huge. Um, it's quote unquote real faith means that you'll never doubt or you'll never fear angry at God or never struggle. Um, you hear messages like, well, if you were truly faithful, you wouldn't still be hurting or you wouldn't be anxious or depressed. So it's tying these emotional reactions to faith. We see speaking out will tarnish the image, so that's silenced. And then this thought, like, if you were stronger, you'd get over this by now. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, we just need to move on.
Yes.
And yeah, I have to bite my tongue every time.
It's in the past.
That, yeah, I mean, it equates spiritual weakness to insufficient faith or your doubt in God.
Right.
And so that's how it's framed in a mental health way.
I have not yet spoken, I can't say to any, in my day-to-day interactions with many, many people all day, every day, very rarely have they not ever in their life been at this point if they've been a 2x2. When I say crisis, when we started working on this show, it was very heavy to really be honest about the depth of the pain that people have carried for decades. And so I really want to just, again, multiple times tonight, we're going to be lifting up anybody out there that's feeling that has struggled with this. I want you to feel seen. We all want you to know that you are not alone in the way that you have felt and what you have felt like you are carrying on just your shoulders. We know, we have talked about how subtle they can be at the shame, how subtle they can be with the silencing. But the next thing I want to go to, next week's show is going to be Therapy 101.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking with a therapist. But one of the things that they do relative to silencing and shaming is about seeking treatment. Talk for a second about what the church's position is on seeking outside treatment and medication.
It's really not supported. The church considers it a worldly solution, and if you just took everything to God, that then you wouldn't need help. So I do want to say, overall, it's not supported. There are some pockets where it's becoming a little bit more so, but then it's being driven towards, well, you need to go to a professing therapist, or you need to go to somebody that truly understands the church. And so there's guardrails even around people accessing treatment. And so that in itself is still that toxic system.
Right. Cynthia, do you want to add anything to that? Cynthia, do you want to add anything to that?
I
think she
I have
might
a
be having some
horrible
internet.
connection. Were you talking to me?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Were you
Okay.
talking to me?
I was just wondering if you wanted
Sorry.
to add anything to that.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we're not making this up, this pressure on survivors by the church. There are actual letters written by workers to survivors, impressing on them the need to forgive their perpetrator and that their perpetrator's salvation is in their hands. So we've written documentation of this. This is not made up. And so that kind of pressure by the church is horrendous, actually.
Horrendous. That's a great word for it. We were just talking about if someone is successful in taking their life, what happens? This is what I want to know outside the 2x2 bubble, Natalie. What happens in a normal family? What kind of resources come in? What kind of therapy comes in? In a normal family, if someone commits suicide in this day and age, communities swoop in, resources come to the top. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of support and structure around that family to help them, because we know how patterns work. We know what happened. All the grief, it's not just the grief, it's the guilt. All of the factors that are involved with someone who has taken their life, and how that impacts the rest of the family. Talk to us for a second about what happens in a normal situation in the world
Yep.
first. We'll start there.
So I oversee our behavioral health services in our county, and one of those services is our suicide task force. We have a loss team that every time that a suicide has happened, 2 people go out either on scene or immediately to the family to just make a connection and give them resources. And this is within hours of when a suicide has been completed. And it's not to start therapy right away. It is just to hear our resources. We will check in with you in a couple of days. Please know that you're not alone in this. And it's just to make that initial connection. And so we have suicide support groups, ongoing support groups for family members and for those people that have committed or that have attempted suicide. If somebody, they fall under what we call a 5150 criteria if they're a danger to themselves or others. If they are suicidal, they get seen within 48 hours in our system of care. They receive not only therapy, but psychiatry, peer support, case management. I mean, we literally wrap our system around people. And it's not just the person that, because suicide is that ripple effect, right? And it's not just that person, it is the family structure that we also want to support.
So I just want to, the reason for that is modeling. We want to model what is normal,
Yeah.
not being told to be silent and pray harder, keep your head down, be quiet, shove it under the rug, and move on with your life. They're gone. It is a very, very different response in the real world of people who are educated, therapists, people who are very, very clear. And we are having a dialogue right now about using the different language between committing suicide and successful suicide. And as soon as that came out, I've had 3 private messages. So there's also some, even around the language, it's very difficult. This is a really tough topic. Nobody wants to hear successful suicide because that's very real. Nobody, like, there's no easy way to have this conversation. So I just want to acknowledge both positions out there on how we're talking about this tonight. Because that leads right into protecting the testimony and what the actual cost. In your opinion, what is the cost of real human beings inside the 2x2 church by the position that they have taken and the way that they handle it?
Well, I think it creates confusion. I think especially for children and young adults that are aware of what's going on and are trying to connect the dots of like, okay, this is the action, this is what happened, and this is the response, and this is the interpretation, and they don't align. And so this response, it teaches and continues this dysfunction. And it highlights that protecting the system is the most important. It's more important than the person that was struggling. It's more important than the family that is trying to kind of wrap their brain around all of this. It's more important than anything is protecting the system.
You've often talked about narcissistic systems and relative. So if anybody has questions about that, you can feel free to go back and watch any of those. But basically, it is obedience over authenticity, no matter
Yep.
what.
No matter what.
So, and then you add on to that the fear of ostracism and eternal consequences and, all that kind of stuff. Plus then the role of isolation, because they say they don't practice shunning, but we know that they do. So you've already mentioned about the identity collapse of what happens when somebody does leave. And that's partly what keeps people in, is because even so people who are in, it keeps them in because the fear of crossing that threshold is so great. The cost is so high
So
for
high.
so many. It's the loss of self, it's their whole well-being, the conditional love, the fear-based belonging, but at least they still belong and they know the rules inside the
Right.
system.
Oh,
And
thank you.
outside the system, they don't know the rules. And there are the guardrails are like way over here, and they're used to this. So there's so much punishment. You've done some conversation about the bite model. You've
Yep.
you've talked with us before about that. So the whole concept of that people feeling like, who am I outside the group? How do I exist outside that? And when the system is requiring death to self, to be a part of the system, despair is pretty much a predictable outcome. You know,
100%.
I mean,
Yep.
authenticity isn't. So, are there protective factors missing in that environment that they could be putting into place, beginning with some mental health training for overseers?
Education, I think, is huge, and we have tried, and we will always continue to try to educate not only people outside the system, but more importantly, educate people still within the system. Modeling open and honest conversations, I think we have to model it. For the most part, the ministry doesn't know how to have an open and honest conversation. I can't tell you how many times I've been lied to. And it got to the point where I was just tired of hearing lie after lie after lie. And then I started questioning, like, well, can they even have an honest conversation? And I think another protective factor is just accountability and consequences for poor behavior, which that's reality. That's
Right.
living in society. Yeah.
So let's get off the system for a little bit. I want to talk for a second about, and someone has just pointed out, we're going to use an attempted suicide, and a successful suicide for the rest of this conversation.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what depression looks like. I want to hear from you first, Cynthia. When you talk with somebody in their first, do you feel like that they've been depressed often all these years coming into this conversation where they pick up the phone and finally call you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just a reality sorry, my connection's so bad if I've talked over you.
That's
Yeah, it's just a reality for so many survivors. I'm thinking back just now to a survivor I talked to in 2023, and this is kind of going back to the system, but they had been assaulted by a worker, a brother worker, a overseer actually, and so there was a lot of shame placed on her about that this may have been her fault that this happened to her, and she was so mortified. She was embarrassed to show her face, frankly, at meetings. But the real trauma that she expressed was that for all these years, she thought she was going to hell because she wasn't going to meeting. So, but yes, so many survivors talk about that they've lived with depression, anxiety, and suicide ideation. Absolutely. It's a reality. So
right.
survivors are not alone.
Very
That's the main
much.
thing I want them to know. They are not alone
Yeah.
in that
Amen to
thinking.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. Natalie, if you would give us a clinical description of what depression looks like.
We could probably do a whole segment on depression.
Okay.
It's such a
If
big
you can make it
topic.
really quick because we have a lot more to
I
get to.
can't. I know we've got so much to go here. So it's not just sadness. I want to say having a normal range of emotions. I mean that's just part of us as human beings. We can be sad and happy and somewhat anxious, and so forth. But it's when it gets to be an emotional numbness is how we describe it, where you are so sad that you can no longer feel other emotions. There's a feeling and a thought of hopelessness, which hopelessness is really the foundation to suicide. It's the feeling that I'm not worth anything and there is no hope. There is also tied to depression a loss of meaning for life. But then you see the physical reactions to depression. So fatigue, people can't sleep, you've got appetite changes and it can be on both extremes where you undereat or overeat. One important note for depression is depression can look different between men and women. And for men, depression can come across as anger. Where women, depression typically comes across as extreme sadness. But they're both, the same type of emotion. And so then you also see in your decision making, there's like a panic around authority, around decision making, and then you've got intrusive thoughts that come in, the negative thoughts that just kind of reinforce feeling depressed.
So one of the things that we've talked about in getting ready for this is that people who think through this, whether they're successful or not, it isn't usually that they want to die, it's that they want the pain to stop.
Yes. Yes.
Because
It's an escape. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I just want to be clear. If you could walk us through some important reframes to some of those thoughts.
Yeah.
What are some
So,
tools who are feeling that right now could walk away with?
yeah. So, and to go, I just kind of want to reemphasize just around suicide. A lot of people don't intend to die when they try whatever they try to do to escape. They have this loss of hope, loss of connection, not feeling seen. And one common theme I hear is being burdensome onto other people. I don't want to be a burden. And so it's that escape from those. And, some terms to avoid. Please don't call someone selfish or weak or sinful. That's not helpful when it comes to describing someone that is in this space. Instead, using terms being overwhelmed, in pain, just struggling to survive day to day. And so those are some terms that we can reframe. But I'm going to go into just really easy questions that you can ask someone if you're concerned. If you are talking to someone and you think, I better check in with them. And a lot of times it's that gut instinct. And we teach this in our advocate class. And we use scaling questions. So, 1 to 10, 1 meaning I feel great, no problem, 10 meaning I am the worst I've ever been. So we ask just 4 questions. What is your anxiety level today? If someone says, I'm a 3 or I'm a 7, that kind of gives you a gauge of where they're at. You can then ask them, okay, what is your depression level today? They'll give you a number. And then you can ask them, what is your level of functioning today? Meaning, your day-to-day things where you take the kids to school, you do your daily activity, you go to work, you show up at work on time. Like, what is your level of functioning? And they will give you a number. And then the last question is, do you have any concerns for your safety or for the safety of others? And you can be very specific. Are you having thoughts of self-harm? Are you feeling suicidal? It's those direct questions that are super important. And there was a myth out there that, oh, don't ask them about suicide because it's going to give them the idea, and that's just not true. It's actually opposite. The more we talk about suicide, the more we come out and ask, I don't hear that you're okay. Are you feeling suicidal? Are you thinking of harming yourself? What does that look like? And after asking these 4 questions, if you feel like this person needs an intervention right away, put them on hold, get on a separate line, and call somebody. You can call 988 and merge the calls together. You can call and have them do a wellness check, or you can ask them, I am really concerned about you. Can I stay on the phone while you can go somewhere safe? Or is there somebody at home that we can talk to, because I'm really concerned about your safety? And so those are things that you can do to really A, assess for safety, and then B, you have a plan on what to do when you've asked these questions. When you do start getting into this conversation, the best thing is stay calm. Just pay attention to your tone, to your volume of your voice. Sometimes when people get nervous, they get kind of squeaky, and that can get kind of annoying over the phone. So just, even if it means, a lot of times I'll take phone calls and I'll walk around. And if I do need to be calm, I'll usually sit down, because then I can kind of ground myself on the other line. Listen more than you speak. So if you ask a question, don't just rush into another question. Give that other person time to respond to you. It's okay if they take a while to answer your question. Don't minimize, and put words in their mouth how you think they're feeling. That's not helpful. And if they do say, yes, I do have a plan, ask some clarifying questions about what their plan is. And that can really help too, if you do need to connect them to outside support, or you do need to call law enforcement to come in and do a welfare check, you have some information to give them.
Love that. Very, very helpful information. If anybody has any questions on that, please do let us know. But yes, there is the advocacy training that Pathways to Healing does. If anybody is interested in doing that again, I think every show I'm going to probably plug that, because it's so important. And this is such, I've had so many, because I run Worthy of the World, I have hundreds of women who have told me about their medication that they've been on for decades, and that they're not on it anymore because they're out and they're free and they're happy and they're learning, and they have, it is so amazing to me how many of them have been on antidepressants, for years and years and years. So let's talk for a second then about the impact on the families and the survivors. What happens to families who are left behind? You talk a lot about the ripple effect. I talk a lot about the ripple effect. We all know what that means.
Yeah. Well, the first ripple, I think, is shock. And it could be numbness, like, this is unreal, what just happened. That can move into, or concurrently be, a lot of guilt. Family members, especially children, self-blaming themselves, like they feel like they've caused a loved one to hurt themselves. We talk a lot about shame and stigma, and that's outside of the church. I mean, just in society in general, there's so much shame and stigma still about behavioral health, but very much so about suicide. just worrying about what others will think. How do they create the narrative that they want other people to believe what happened? One very common reaction is getting very angry at the person that either attempted suicide or completed their suicide, and they can be stuck in that anger for quite some time. For children in particular, confused about what just happened, and then as children feeling rejected by a family member or feeling rejected by the other family that refuses to talk about it. And kids are very, very intuitive, and they pick up on a lot of nuances. We see that survivors of or family members of people that completed suicide sometimes will develop their own suicidal thoughts, and so they're at high risk. It's not uncommon when we're working with suicide survivors, when we start working with them, to hear that suicide is common in their family. Either a dad or somebody else in their family has either attempted or completed suicide in the past. Then you see a lot of like unsafe coping mechanisms. So divorce rates are super high in these situations. Alcohol use, drugs, overworking is very common. Of just not wanting to deal with anything at home and staying away. And then I think overall your family dynamics change. And it can either change for the better, or it can just increase conflict and it just be so disruptive. And what I mean it can change better, I've seen families, this was almost like a wake-up call for them, and they got closer and opened up, and so we have seen that, but mostly we see this increased conflict. There's a blaming, silence, and so those are some of the dynamics that we see in families.
So we know how much shame and stigma complicate the whole grief process. We already have a lot of grief just coming out of it. It looks really complicated. We've already acknowledged that suicide is difficult to talk about. I still don't think it is. It was hard for us to even kind of, it's not easy to have this conversation. But it's so important. It is so, so important. And so I want to can you talk for a second about, I would love to hear from you on this part, Cynthia, too. When community, what can we do as a community to do a better job around this dialogue, in your opinion?
I think just talking about it, and if two of the complicating factors are lack of social support and belief, those two things right there are a step forward. Showing the social support for survivors and believing, that gets us down the road already, and supporting. So
Right.
I just think talking about it instead of keeping it, the silence is a prison, right? We've talked about that. So
Silence is a prison.
that's
Natalie,
all
how
I've
would
got
you
to offer. I'm sure Dr. Bolin, sorry, I have such a bad connection. Yeah, I'm sure Dr. Bolin has much more that she can share.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Well, I think it's important to be honest about what happened. And you can talk about suicide and be very gentle around it. You can be very clear and very sensitive. I remember working in Child Protective Services, and we removed the children, and a parent committed suicide. And sitting down with the kids and having to tell them what happened.
Right.
And it's heart-wrenching and it's awful, and it is the most loving thing that we can do, is have a clear conversation about what exactly happened. And it doesn't just stop there, and then it moves into actively supporting everyone that's affected. When we had a situation here where we had an 8-year-old complete suicide, and we sent everyone out to the school. It was a school response. We met with kids and teachers, and we used the school as a community, kind of as a town hall. So really creating a space where people can gather. It's important to talk about the person, to share memories. And you're going to see a whole range of emotions. You're going to see people upset, crying. You're going to see people, bring up funny memories and process the loss. It's a whole spread. And so it's just creating those safe spaces where we may not have the perfect thing to say, but just being willing to sit in somebody's space when they're in this place, that's all that's needed. Cynthia talked about human connection. It's just connecting with that other person or a community. And there's a lot of times we'll show up on scene and it's just sitting down on the ground and it's holding somebody's hand and it's not saying anything. And then lastly, I think it's really just respecting how different people grieve. It looks different across the board. And so not being surprised by different reactions, because it can be a lot of different things.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons that I really wanted to continue moving forward with Survivor Rites, is so that we could have conversations like this, but also provide tools and resources to people who are specifically related to the 2x2 church, just because having exactly what you said, the direct dialogue, the conversations, they're not easy, but they are so important. Beverly Pine saying correct language and direct language around hard topics in a caring manner is so important. Yes, and that's just that was not modeled for us inside the church at all. Communication, Steve Vandermeiden and I are going to talk about communication in general on Sunday together, Sunday morning. But yeah, it's a real problem of being able to even, we suppress so many of our emotions, and we learned so much how to just push it down, push it down, push it down. And when that starts, I just want to be very clear that what they're doing is creating pressure cookers, okay? So, and everybody thinks that they're the only one. This church has done it around the world to every age, men, women, all of it. It's staggering. It's something that we deal with. Another reason that we wanted to move forward here is because it's exhausting for those of us that do deal with this on the front lines every day. It is important that everybody in this congregation, or was at one time a part of it, start to really understand the full impact of truly what is happening, and it no longer be silenced, and that it no longer be dealt with behind the scenes by a few people who are taking care of it, okay? You're looking at just a few of us that are behind the scenes taking care of it. It's exhausting, and we are wanting everyone here to understand that this is all of our problem, and we can all be part of the solution, and that's what community really is about. So let's talk for a second about prevention and accountability. What are some very concrete changes that somebody could make in their own life to reduce risk, that this church could make to reduce risk, that anybody that's worried about somebody? I'll let you start with that, Natalie.
I do want to so I'll jump into that. I do want to bring up a topic that comes up quite a bit, and we see this. We see it with survivors that have psychologically attached their healing to justice. And so when either justice is delayed, or maybe justice it doesn't happen, right? It doesn't, or maybe it does. and maybe the case is prosecuted and goes to court, it doesn't erase the trauma symptoms at all. It actually can increase them. And so I do want to kind of bring up this thought, like healing and justice, they have to be interdependent. They have to be in their own lane. And it's okay to say two things. I want to be healed and I want justice. And they can parallel one another, but they can't be dependent on one another, if that makes sense. It really has to be like two separate lanes. And so I want to bring that up because it does increase suicidality when healing is tied to justice. And again, the longevity of this investigation and how long it takes to get justice, if you can get justice at all, I would just want to bring that up. I don't feel like I'm explaining it very well, but it just kind of popped in my brain of like, we need to really talk about this.
Yeah, Cynthia, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say on that.
Oh, just same thing. Survivors can get really frustrated. It's almost like, oh, I'm not believed, and this isn't going to be solved if this case doesn't move forward. It kind of throws them back into the trauma almost. And yeah, if we can keep those separated and do not tie your healing to the outcome on the criminal justice side of things or civil justice, it's almost like that's a bonus if there's accountability there, but don't tie your healing to it. Because it can be detrimental to your healing path. Yep.
Totally agree. And that's also partly why I talk a lot about social justice sometimes, and that's what we're trying to do here, is to create some social justice for people, is to talk about things. I started interviewing today in my first interview for the Survivor series that we're going to be starting. They're all pre-recorded. Those are not something I would ever do live. But people who have come and come forward and said, I want my story recorded and I want to be, so people will be able to watch those here very soon. But there is still a need, even when their person has deceased, that Cynthia, you and I the three of us have had this conversation about that, the 2x2s don't know how to lament very well. And so they're deceased and they're seeking justice, and so there's no closure, and it's just this whole ball of frustration in that conversation. But yeah, so much there. So let's talk about building support systems and reclaiming community so that we can move forward. Is there anything more that you want to add on the severity of this issue inside the church, the incredible depth of despair that people are living with? Is there anything that either of you want to add to the scope or the depth of this problem?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I checked with somebody in a different country on this subject of suicide within the 2x2 system, and she reached out to a small group of friends, and within, I think, an hour, they came up with 36 names of people who they knew had committed suicide within the system. So it's a problem that's not talked about. So that's reality. It's
Yes.
way above the national averages.
Way.
What's
Even
that?
when we started
Sorry.
having the conversation around this, getting ready for tonight, when we started talking about everybody we know, everything that we've gone through, witnessed, dealt with.
Well, and that's on
Yeah.
top of the survivors that have been suicidal, and haven't completed suicide.
Right.
And that number is astronomical as well. And so, and I can't emphasize enough for this community the need to wrap ourselves around one another. It literally will save lives.
Yes.
And I just want to emphasize that.
So
Yeah,
let's have that
as part of
conversation.
that, yeah, as
ahead.
part of that, Natalie, when you were talking about advocating, we've made a lot of calls over the last 3 years. We've done wellness checks on people.
Yes.
And I don't
Yep.
want people to be afraid of doing that. Find the
Yeah.
non-emergency line in their area, find out where they are, get the non-emergency line, and make a phone call. And I've had people mad at me for doing that because the cops show up at your house. But if you're really concerned about somebody, I mean, I'm not a professional. I'm not a therapist. It's over my pay grade, right? I want to call somebody that knows what they're doing and send out a wellness
Yep.
check. So I do not want people to be afraid to do that.
I don't either. I think that's such a good point. And so maybe just walking through that process really quickly again
Hmm.
for people, anyone can call and ask for a wellness check to be done on anyone. And I have done it numerous times as well. And the dispatcher will just ask for, do you have an address? Do you have a name? And any information that you might have about the person, whether or not you know if they have weapons in the house or not, is there children in the house. They'll just ask just clarifying questions. Sometimes they'll keep you on the line as they send out an officer, and then they'll ask for your phone number. And many times they will call you back and let you know what happened. And so many times I'll get a call back saying, you know, we were able to safety plan, or family stepped in and said, you know what, we're good, we're going to take them to the emergency room, or no, we placed them on a 5150 hold and we're going to go get them some help. And so there, which is, it's nice to have some closure so you know what happened. But anyone can do this. It's not just a therapist. It's not just a trained advocate. It's anyone. And it's called a wellness check when you call the non-emergency number.
Yep.
So let's talk about what this plan looks like. Let's talk about how connection is so important. It is the biggest protective factor that we as a community can have to reduce the numbers of suicidal ideation and the numbers of completed suicides. We have to do something. We must, as a community, take ownership of this very, very real problem and address it head on. And that's when I say it's going to take an army. This is what we're talking about. We must restore our identity through being seen. We must get rid of the narrative that we are worthless, that we are not worthy of connection or love or belonging to a community anymore. I want to have you guys talk through that, but there's a lot of different types of support out there, Natalie, if you would just kind of run through some of those, because
Yeah.
we are going to be in this community here on Survivor Rights. You're all going to hear about this over and over and over from us, because it's going to take every one of you. You know, you have no idea. I cannot tell anybody out there what a simple call. If you have a nudge, if someone comes into your brain and you think for a second, I should check on that person. I want to implore anyone watching this now or later, ever, pick up that phone. Pick up
Yes.
that phone. There's a reason that person is coming to your mind. Do it. We check on each other here all the time.
Yes.
All the time. Because we know how hard this is. So I'm going to have you go ahead and go through that. But I want to spread out some of this responsibility and let everybody know you can be a part of this solution, because it's going to take loving and understanding and education on all of our parts to start wrapping our arms around the people who are feeling so alone, so lost, and so unworthy.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, it starts with just having support with others that have similar experiences or that understand the culture. And so if you or you know of somebody that has been suicidal before in the past and wants to be a help to others, you know, there's something so connecting and calming when you hear somebody on the other side go, I understand what you're going through. I've had a similar experience. It's just so validating. And so that is probably the most important support out there is having that safe person that has had similar experiences. Mental health professionals, please lean in to the mental health world, especially the mental health world that is outside of the church. And I want to emphasize that too, because it's really important to get an outside perspective. And it's a mental health professional that's trauma informed, understands religious trauma. There's, certain things that we look at when we start making connections. Creating a crisis support, creating a crisis plan, having a frank discussion with somebody that has a history of being suicidal. The worst time to create a crisis plan is in the middle of a crisis. So have those discussions when you're not in a crisis around, hey, how can I support you? What has worked in the past? And even write it out so you remember. It can be a really high emotional situation. Identifying safe friends, family, and it's okay to start small. It's okay to have, your tribe around you, but it's just really important to start building even, community connections where you have somebody you can call, community groups. There is typically a suicide task force in every community. And so
In the world.
in the world, absolutely. And so getting involved locally, suicide task force, there's free training, assist training is really good, mental health 101, safe talk. You can just Google local suicide training within your area, and many times they're free to do, and you can go be trained on how to have these conversations. And so education is huge, and that's how you can be a huge support to people around you.
I love that.
Don't we have a
Go ahead.
template for safety plans?
We do.
Don't we have a
Yep,
safety
and we
plan
do
template?
share that.
Yeah,
We do. We've got a template for that.
yeah,
Okay, we'll be putting that in the comments for sure.
yeah.
And questions you can ask, and we can share the questions I went over. We can share that.
Yes, yes. We have a lot of resources that we'll be posting in the comments after this. The other thing that I want to add to that is, and this is something that the three of us haven't discussed, but I'm going to say it for myself. We all get a lot of messages from a lot of people, and they come in on WhatsApp and text messages and phone calls and emails, and we have multiple email addresses and Facebook Messenger and Instagram literally the three of us are inundated all day, every day. I would like to ask, and I just am putting this out there, if any of you are in crisis, for myself personally, if you could put like an asterisk or 988 or something at the beginning of your message when it's urgent. It's happened to me a couple of times where somebody's been in crisis and I didn't find the message, or it got lost in 50 other messages that came in at the same time. The phones, my phones, I have my phone set that it will prioritize anything that says something like that in it. So I would just like to encourage anybody out there that is reaching out. I want to welcome you to reach out to us. I also would just ask that if you are in an urgent situation, that you let us know up front that it's urgent. Would you? Yeah.
Well, and I would even say reach out to your local crisis,
Yes.
because they're the ones that are going to be able to respond to you the fastest.
Yes.
So you're right, Crystal, 988 is your go-to.
Yeah.
If you are in a crisis, and it doesn't mean that if you call 988 that they're going to send somebody out. There is a trained professional on the other side that's going to talk with you, safety plan with you. They're going to do a lot of things before it gets to the point where they may send out a crisis team. And 988 is connected to crisis team more than they are connected to law enforcement. And so in most areas, a crisis team will come out versus law enforcement. We've really been trying to move away from law enforcement response. But if you need somebody to talk to and you don't have anyone to call, 988 is that first number, and I want to emphasize it's the local crisis because they're the ones that are going to get to you the
Yes.
fastest.
Yes. Yes.
Or
Um,
also, I think you'll agree, Natalie, if you're really in crisis, get yourself to the hospital.
yes.
Absolutely.
Go
Go straight
to
to
the
the emergency
hospital.
room.
Yeah, go
Yes.
straight to the
Yep.
emergency room.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
we
And
need
if
to,
you are home alone and you are in crisis, do not drive. Call 911 and
yes.
ask for an ambulance transport.
Yes.
Yeah. And
So
don't
we
be
are,
ashamed or afraid. Don't, sorry, Crystal. Don't be ashamed or afraid to
no,
do it. Do not be ashamed or
yeah,
afraid to do it. It's okay.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
We are going to go over a little bit on time tonight. I knew that we kind of would. This is too big of a topic. I'm not going to cut us off. It's too important. I want to address very quickly for people who are still in the church. I want again to repeat to have a direct conversation. I also want to have a conversation with our own community as well as people who are still in all. It's all we're all one community. We're all two by two something. So about confidentiality. It's so important. We came from such a gossipy community and such a nah. Something happened on Survivor that everybody's aware of earlier. Like, and I just want to address. I will never ever, even if you're my friend, I will not be discussing with you the details of anybody's situation and how that plays out or what happens after the fact. What I can assure you of 1000% every time is that we will do everything in our power to reach out to anybody that needs help, needs support, but it is not fodder for gossip, okay? I just want to make that very, very clear. And I will
I
not
think that's
tolerate that
important.
in this group as well. Go ahead, what?
And I think that's important, Crystal. It falls under PHI, protected health information. So therapists, doctors, school personnel. If you have a license, you typically have to adhere to private health or protected health information, except there is a clause called duty to protect, meaning if someone comes and sees me as their therapist, what we talk about is totally confidential. In fact, if I break that confidentiality, I would lose my license. That's how important it is. Duty to protect is that if there is an immediate risk or serious harm to the individual or someone else, confidentiality can be broken to call for help. And so I do want to stress and again, as a licensed professional, if I don't call someone for help, I can also lose my license. And so, but we take confidentiality very serious. And that's why in Pathway to Healing Network, we have our own electronic health record system that we use.
Right.
Because we take it very seriously.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll even add to that, even amongst ourselves, we've discussed situations, but we don't use names. We can talk about a crisis situation without using somebody's name. So
Correct.
Yep.
And
we're
we
careful.
don't use the name.
Yeah, right.
We don't. Okay, so what is one small step that someone could take tonight, whether they're in crisis or they want to be helping this move forward? Both of those. Is there something that you could say? You're very good at just teaching just simple things like what you did last time, Natalie, on being aware of your surroundings and taking a breath and noticing something in your, what would you say to that?
We teach this in school sites, and it's see something, say something. You could also hear something, say something. And I guess that small step is being aware, know what to look for, know some of the risk factors, and don't be afraid to say something.
Love that. So some of the ways that we could be proactive in preventing suicidal thoughts for this community, we talk a lot about protective factors that are out there. We focus very much on many of these things. I'm going to let you kind of go down the list, if you would, Natalie, on what it's going to take. So if somebody's feeling those things and they're like, oh, I've felt this way for decades, I'll always feel this way. No, healing is possible. I really want to clarify that. Healing
Yes,
really is possible. I want
it
to have,
is, and it's why most of us that are in social work and in this space keep doing the work we're doing, is because we do see healing every day. And that's what makes it so rewarding. If we didn't, I would have been burnt out my first year. And so, just some proactive or protective factors. We talked a lot about identity reconstruction, and especially coming out of this church where your true self, your identity is really wrapped up into a system. So really kind of learning who you are and finding meaning outside of the system. I would say finding joy, learning how to emotionally express yourself instead of I'm fine, doing great. Really creating your autonomy outside of a system, learning your voice and choice, and then really building that connection. It's all about secure relationships and building a tribe. Relationship with a therapist, that's 99% of therapy, right? If you have a good connection with your therapist, typically you're going to have healing in place. If you don't have a good connection with your therapist, healing is going to be really difficult, and I would say you need to go find another therapist, because that's how important connection is. Some practical prevention strategies, regular mental health check-ins. It can be with your friends. It can be with a mental health professional. I think it's important to normalize therapy. Let's normalize it like physical health. We don't hesitate to say, oh, I had to go to the doctor, I had to get my heart checked out, or, I've got this spot on my ear, I need to go get checked out. Like, we don't even think twice about it. Well, we need to normalize therapy just like we do physical health.
yes.
It's important to teach, emotional vocabulary, to be able to explain, like, I'm not okay, and this is how I'm feeling. I think it's important to encourage rest. It's important to say, I got to take a time out. This thing, I need to put it down. I just need to go off grid for a little bit. Pleasure, which in our church, our former church, often very forbidden. Finding joy and finding things you like to do, I think, is so important. So those are just some prevention strategies.
So the note that I have written down here, I'm just going to read it because, man, girl, you just said it. Suicide prevention isn't just about stopping death. It is about rebuilding a life that's worth staying alive for. And that is why there's a crisis inside the 2x2 church. So we want to focus on everything that you just said and all the tools and resources that we can bring to people to build a life that is worth staying for, a life that has meaning and joy and purpose and all of those things. So I'm gonna give this part to you, Cynthia, on reiterating that they're not broken and really encouraging ongoing connection. Where's the line with that? I want to hear that from you.
Well, that they're not alone, that they're not broken. This is so normal. This is that there is a absolute link between child sex abuse and sex assault and suicide ideation. So you are not weird for having the thoughts that you've had, and you're actually normal. And don't be afraid to talk about it. That's why we're talking about it. Don't be afraid to talk about it. There's a whole community out here that's wrapping their brains around this and starting to understand what complex PSD is all about. And let's all do it together. I mean, let's learn together for the people who have have questions about this subject, research it, and get educated, learn what you can do to be an advocate. I don't even remember what you asked me.
No,
That's what I'm
you
thinking.
answered it.
Great.
I want to ask for the audience if there are any questions out there before we wrap this up. Any questions that you guys have for either one of us, either one of them, not me, them, either one of them. Questions specifically to them, please feel free to ask them. We will be monitoring comments. We will also be putting resources into the comments tonight. And also, when we do post this on YouTube, we will be posting all of those resources to YouTube as well. Hopefully, this has been very helpful for everybody. I want to repeat the 988 suicide and crisis line. That is pretty standard around the world, but there are international resources out there. And I just want to encourage professional help. I want to encourage anybody that's out there that needs to reach out and to get the help that they need. And, I don't think that we can say that enough. But the last word I want to hear from each of you, my question to you is this. What gives each of you hope? As we have this conversation tonight, and when we know what we deal with every single day, it's still very real. There's still so many things that we say it every day. We could not make this up. I want to hear from each of you. What gives you hope? Natalie?
I think what gives me hope is seeing the community that has left the church still very engaged in conversation, still very concerned about building a safe community. And that's creating that safe space for, as individuals leave or children coming up, that we're building a safe community. And that's what gives me hope.
I love that. Cynthia?
Yeah, I see lives transforming. Have for a long time in this work that lives can be transformed and people find a place of healing. And then, yeah, stronger community. I mean, there are people from meetings who are better friends than they ever were outside of meetings. And I would love to see those relationships on both sides, right? Where there's not the judgment, whether you're in or out, just a strong community all the way around, with understanding around this crisis. That all gives me hope that we can get there, and that we can educate people around this difficult subject.
I think so too. It's going to be breaking down those walls and barriers of communication to it being an attack on faith.
Right.
It is a very real problem and it needs to be dealt with.
I had one more thing I wanted to say.
Go.
I can't tell you how many survivors, and I'm sure we've all heard it, how many survivors say somebody else needs the help more than I do. No. Ask for the help.
Yes.
Take it. Okay, you deserve it.
That's right.
More than anybody, or as much as anybody. So,
I think that's
just
very
wanna
good
say that.
advice. I also get a lot of people who say, I'm so unworthy of your time, or I don't want to take any more of your time. Our level of commitment to this is, we're going to die on this. This is just how it's going to go. And the total and complete commitment to whatever it takes, and we have a strong system of support. We all do, and that's so important. So I just anything else that you wanted to add, Natalie?
Nope, but thank you. Thanks for everyone that joined us tonight.
Yeah, thanks
Great.
everybody out there. Thank you for everyone's willingness to step up. Kelly said, I'm getting my boots on. So, just stepping up and feeling, knowing that you can make a difference and how you love and care for someone else can truly change lives. And this is a very, very real problem. We did not go through specific numbers tonight. We can tell you with absolute authority, it's way too many.
Absolutely.
All right. With that, Hope everybody has a good night. Feel free to reach out to any of us personally if you need to, but we're going to be checking in to just see how everyone is. Again, our Sunday morning show is going to be Steve Vandermeiden. We're going to be talking about communication. I am interviewing David Ailing tomorrow night, so I'll be posting that. And then also we'll be starting the Survivor Rites Survivor Series here pretty soon. So lots to look forward to, and I want to thank everybody for all the love and care. And have a great rest of your night. And we will see you next week on the same show doing Therapy 101 again with Natalie. So thank you, everybody, and love to all.
Thank you.